Today we are in the oldest distillery in Scotland. It's called the Glenturret. So there you go. As mentioned, we are here at the Glenturret Distillery here in Scotland, and shortly we will be joining a tour around the distillery, and one of the member staff of Glenturret Distillery will be explaining to us the whole process of how to make whiskey. So I hope you guys enjoy, and as usual, don't forget to subscribe, give me a like, and comment where you're watching this video from. Let's go. This cat apparently caught 29,000 mice. That is amazing. He must have been fatter than that, obviously. He had that many mice. Glenturret Distillery is located 2 miles northwest of a place called Crieff. This distillery was established in 1763. After many changes in ownership, this place was acquired by the group Lalique in 2018. I will advise you to come and visit the Glenturret. It's a really nice experience, and also you have the tour guide explaining to you the whole process of the whiskey, and the ticket comprises several shots of whiskey, which is fantastic. Now I will leave you with the tour guide of Glenturret, who will explain to us this process a little bit further.
This is what the guys used to use for mixing and extracting sugar. So they'd be at the end of this and they'd just be shoving it backwards and forwards and breaking it all up and extract the sugar. Now we transfer the sugar from next door through to here. So the red line here is sugar. These get extensions fitted to it, and it fills up these bottom 4, and the one down there fills the other 4. So we're transferring 6,000 litres of sugar into the washback at 18 degrees. So where we are at the moment, we're up here, because all these are about 4 metres deep. Okay? Now when we're making spirit in here, it's a natural process in here. A completely natural process. Because here it's natural, we put the sugar and the yeast together. The sugar goes at 6,000 litres at 18 degrees, and we just cut that bag of yeast there and we just throw it in, 25 kilograms on top of it, and we leave it. Now in here, it starts reacting itself. The sugar and yeast start creating energy. Energy creates heat. Within 24 hours of it going in at 18 degrees, it's all the way up to 28, 29 degrees, and we didn't touch it. We leave that for a further 2.5 to 3 days, we have 8% alcohol, completely natural, and we never laid a finger on it. This did all the work. That's the old way of doing stuff. Modern distilleries are made of stainless steel, half of them, and stainless steel is cold and inert. You have to start the process by warming. We don't, we just let it be. But it takes 3.5 to 4 days. They can make alcohol in 2 to 2.5 days because they want to speed it up and force it. We do nothing at all. That's why it's completely natural. Now you're asking about the wood, and the wood in here is a very big part of what we make. Now, if you look at these 3 photographs, that's those 2. Now these are made by craftsmen. There's no nails, no pins, no screw, no glue. It's basically a 4-metre barrel, straight though. So you've got a 4-metre straight barrel with nothing holding it together. That is beautifully planed. That gap there fits at the base. You stand the legs up, put the bands on it, and that's us for 45 years. And that will continue to be worth using all the time. Now they use Douglas fir for a very, very specific reason. In UK, any wood you see is like this. The top of here has got knots everywhere, and knots come from branches. There's no knots on that. There's not a single knot in that wood. Because Douglas fir has no branches for about 10 to 15 metres. And if you have no branches, you have no knots. And if you have no knots, you have no communication from inside the container to outside the container. So no contaminants ever went through. And that's what it originally made for. Now, David Douglas brought it to Scotland and grew it in Scone Palace, and you can still see the original ones in Scone Palace, but they're about that wide. They are massive trees. And that's where he first started growing it. But it came from America. It's called Oregon pine. That's where it originated. Now I reckon after it started growing here, the Scots just dragged it all over the world with them, because I have found it in most of the countries I've worked in. And I found it in Canada, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand. The only people that's moving it or cutting it down is New Zealand, because they say it's not indigenous to the country, so they're removing it all. But everybody else still uses it for furniture or other stuff. Now, when you're making alcohol, you're producing different stuff. How many people are Scots in here?
Aye.
Right, so if I said you were barmy, what's barmy?
Crazy.
Slightly nuts.
Aye.
Wrong diagnosis. They were brain damaged. People were classed as 17 and 1800s who were classed as barmy or crazy, were actually brain damaged from making alcohol, making whiskies. That, when the process is like this, where the bubbles are coming out, that's barm. That's where barmy came from.
Barmy, yeah.
People who were making spirits and making whiskey from barm were breathing CO2 constantly. Their CO2 is heavier than air. The CO2 would fill up the inside of the washback, come over, drop on the floor. In here it drops down to the basement, and we go vacuum scrubbers removing it. In the old days, people hadn't got a clue. They might have one or two like this. The CO2 is falling on the floor and slowly but surely filling the room up, forcing the oxygen out. Because it's heavier than air, it just pushes oxygen out of the way, and it fills up. And people were breathing more and more CO2 and less oxygen. Constant repetitive working with it, and you were getting brain damage. It affected your speech, you couldn't control your limbs and couldn't communicate. People thought you were nuts. But you weren't nuts, you were brain damaged from making whiskies.
Wow.
And it's not whiskey, it's gin, vodka, vodka, anything produces CO2. So we make 8% CO2, and 8% whiskey, spirits in here. It's not a whiskey, it's a spirit. From here, it then goes through next door and make it stronger and stronger and stronger. The stills do not add any colour, taste or aroma. All they do is make it strong. Now from here on in, it has some taste and it has some aroma of alcohol. But that's from the malting process before it gets here and being in here. That's where it's getting a little bit of flavour from. But the stills add nothing. All they do is make it stronger and stronger and stronger. Every still is designed to make one type of spirit. This still is designed to make a very, very fine, light spirit because we have two reactions. A lot of distilleries you go to, that's not there, it just goes straight up. That distillery is going to make an oilier, creamier spirit than we are, because we have two reactions. But all malt whiskey has oil in it, all of it. Because we're extracting the hot sugar, we're pulling barley oil from the barley at the same time. And that barley oil goes through the system, and that's part of your whiskey. You want it, you don't want to remove it, you just want to make it as fine as what you want to supply with. So what's like this, 12,000 litres goes in there, 8% alcohol. Open the valve, and all we do is let it run in, because there's no computers in here, so it's all hands-on. In here, and we heat the still to 92 degrees. And we use steam. It's a gas steam generator. So steam's heating the still. Because steam goes all over. You don't get patchy heat, you get an overall heat. So as this starts heating up, the vapour starts rising, and the solids and the waste products all go down the way. So as the vapour gets lighter and lighter, it gets to here, it's not hot enough to go up, so the vapour starts rotating inside the still. As it's rotating, you're getting a chemical reaction with the vapour and copper, because copper cleans it. the copper's removing sulfates, and all the solids go down the way, and the vapour gets lighter and lighter and lighter, until it gets to the right temperature, it goes into the second chamber, and repeats it all over again. That's why in here, we have a very, very fine light spirit, because it goes through twice. Now when it goes up and outside, we're cooling it down outside with those big copper towers you saw as you went past. That's my cooling system. And we use river water, because the river water here is freezing. We don't need any help from any refrigerants, that's colder. So we can pump the river water up the inside of it, and as the vapour passes it, the vapour converts back to a fluid, and comes back in the wall between 23 and 25% alcohol. That goes to a big holding tank where you are standing on top of. It goes to the spirit still. It's redistilled again, sent outside, through the cooling system and back in. Now we started at 8, this brings it to about 25. When it comes out of there, it can be as high as 75% alcohol. And this is ridiculously dangerous. If you think of the flash point of fuel, basic fuels you guys see every day. Diesel you have to warm up to make it burn. Petrol burns reasonably quick. Aircraft fuel burns very, very, very quickly. What comes out of there will flash off and go on fire before aircraft fuel does. You're not allowed to transport or move whiskey spirit in Scotland. It's 70% alcohol or above, because it's too dangerous to move. So you cannot transfer it.
Have you ever tried it?
I've got no, I've seen this stuff burn. I've worked all over the world. And in Saudi Arabia one time I was there when somebody had a still of their own and it blew up and there was really beautiful light blue flash. You don't want to be anywhere near it, I'll tell you, because it burns fast and hard. And this is what it is. Now if we change into this process, we make a different new make spirit. And you cannot make a different spirit, because you make a new different spirit, that's what's going in your barrels, and you're going to end up with a different whiskey on your hand. So we can't change anything. We can't change the yeast, we can't change the barley, we can't change the temperatures, because it all changes what we make. Now these, we blast clean with water every day. Every second day, we acid flush the inside of the copper. This is to remove the residue that's building up inside the copper, because if you don't remove it, it takes longer to heat up, and I end up with a different spirit at the end of the day, which I do not want. So you have to make sure it's maintained and done all the same, every time.
How long does that take?
What, the whole lot?
To clean it?
Oh no, you've got a couple of hours, it's a spray. You just flash it off and then blow it clean.
Right.
But it's all delays when you have to stop, and then you can't make the alcohol, and you have to wait for it all to be ready. So there's always gaps. There's days when this is shut down, or the sugar's not being extracted, because all that in there is waiting to be ready before it goes in here. Now about 30 years ago, there was a new distillery being built. The stills were delivered on site, and they dropped the wash still. They dropped this one. When they dropped it, they put a big dent in the side of this thing. They could use it. It was all right to use because it wasn't split. And they used it for about 15, 20 years until they wanted to expand. And then they had to buy more stills. But the new stills had to have the same damage as the old still to make sure the copper would react with the vapour and give you the same product at the end of the day. Otherwise you're caught and you can't do nothing. This is the type of thing that drives you crazy. You can't change anything. You bring it back here as a low wine. Now that low wine, the name comes from because of an old distilling name. Low wine, 25% alcohol, nothing we can use with it, so it's just classed as a low wine. And that's brought through the back of here, and it goes into that glass there. If we run it at 9 litres a minute, 25% alcohol, comes under here to here, back to the second still, redistill it, and that's when it's coming back, and it can be as high as 75. Now coming in here, this is where we separate the run of the spirit. Now this is the only way we check alcohol content. We've no computers doing it, we still use hydrometer. Like if you're making spirits or beer at home, you make a hydrometer. Open the valve, fills up with fluid, when the hydrometer starts floating, you take the reading off that and the reading off the temperature at the back, and that's your alcohol content. You don't need all the fancy stuff as long as you're doing it hands-on all the time. And our stillman do it hands-on constantly. Now this is when he's running it and he wants to check it and he wants to separate it. Because it's actually called cutting the run of the spirit. I don't like using the word cut because I'm not adding water, I'm separating into 3 components. We're breaking it down to the head, the heart, and the tail. We want to extract the heart, and the head and the tail get recycled. Now the head can be anything from 75 down to about 67, 68. That's the head. From 68 down to 62 is the heart. That's what we're going to extract and make whiskey from. And below 62 is too low on alcohol content, so that gets recycled. So the head and the tail is recycled, and it's as simple as this. So the stillman is checking alcohol content. As soon as it gets down between 68, this is where it gets really technical. That's it. That's all we do. Goes in that glass for the next 3 hours. Now the head's only going to run for about 4 minutes. So he has to stay here and check the alcohol content all the time. When it drops down below 68, he's then in the heart, and he transfers that to there, and that will run in that glass for about 3 hours. Once it's come down to about 62, all he does is revert it back to here. So the head and the tail goes here, and the heart's been extracted to that tank, then underground across the road, because we barrel directly across the road. Now we've no customs officers here, because we don't bottle on site. It's only have bottling, you have customs. Because you don't pay duty till it goes in the bottle. Wow. But we used to have them a long time ago. And that used to be where his padlock was. Right. So we couldn't open this unless he was on site, and they couldn't open it unless you had a manager in front of them. But they weren't very trusting. Because the custom padlock, or a special padlock, when you turned the key in, a piece of paper came out when you opened it. And that piece of paper had to go in your logbook to show that no one had opened it while he wasn't here. And you better have your numbers in right, I'll tell you. And that waste product is called pot ale. Now that pot ale is the water, the yeast, and anything else that's there, like all the sulfates that the copper's extracted. Now that goes to the farms, and that's fertilizer. That gets reused again. At the moment, we're asking the farmers if they can test our fertilizer from our distillery using their barley to see if it's fit for the use to grow barley. If it is, then we have a complete cycle. And it'll be that's a stunning cycle to have, where you have no losses and you're reusing everything to regrow what you started to grow in the first place. That's as good as we're going to get. Yeah. Now, there's one product that comes out of here which is dangerous, and that's the head. You may have heard the old saying, blind drunk. Blind drunk's nothing to do with drinking too much. Blind drunk refers to anybody drinking in the first 30 seconds of the head coming out of there, because that will cause alcoholic blindness, and if it concentrates too high, it can kill you stone dead. Wow. Now this still happens. I do not know why, but it still happens. When people end up with alcohol blindness, if you go on the television, you go on the internet, they'll tell you how to make it, and you don't have any of the problems. But in UK, year before last, somebody got a slight touch of alcohol poison. In Poland, a whole batch of people got hit because they were making vodka. And in the US, very rarely happens because they've been making moonshine for over 300 years. When the Scots and Irish were thrown out of the country and sent over there, they just adapted what they were making at home to what they're making there. That's why bourbon came in. Here, barley was cheap, so they made alcohol. In America, corn was everywhere, and they were using it, and they used to turn that into bourbon. And that's how the differences changed. Now, when you're making moonshine in the mountains, if you actually ever want to see it, you can. There's a program on UK television at the moment called The Moonshiners, or you can go on your laptop or your computer and just type in how to make the moonshine. I know it sounds wrong, but that's how it opens it up. How to make the moonshine. And it links you to a discovery program in the US where they actually show you making moonshine in West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, in the mountains, in the woods. Then it shows you, but these guys know what they're doing. When that first run of spirit comes out, you'll see them pick it up, look at it, and spin the glass. And you can see the movement and the density. He'll tell you what your alcohol content is. And he'll throw it away because he knows it's wrong. The head's still in there. And he'll test it again, and he'll say it's all right to use, and they'll go forward and use it. Every barrel comes in here empty. Now if you look in there, that's all modern ones, you can see they're all level. Yeah? You look at there, every barrel's a different height, a different width, and a different weight. Because this is old fashioned. Now every barrel's handmade, so they're all different sizes. They've got different densities because there's different fluids in them. Could be bourbon, sherry, port, wine, anything can be in it. So what happens is an empty barrel comes in here and it goes on a scale. We take the base level for it, the tail weight, so we know there's nothing in it. From there it's rolled over like this. We take the filling head down and we fill it up. Now in here we're using alcohol content, it's 63.4 alcohol content. Prior to this, before we were owned by Edrington, we made 68 or 69% alcohol. But Bob Delgado came in and said, drop it by 3 or 4 and you'll get more flavour. So now we do 63.4, we get better colours, better taste and better aroma coming out of the barrel. Just by dropping it at 4 or 5% alcohol, you get better taste coming out. Once it's full, it goes back on here again and we weigh it. Because this is the only way we can then calculate what we're going to lose. We lose what's known as the angel share. But the angel share is actually a calculation. It's 2% by volume per barrel per year. That's a 500 litre barrel. But that, I'm going to lose 2% by volume per year. As the volume drops, I'll lose slightly less. But I'm going to lose about 20 litres of alcohol out of that in 10 years. And we don't like to touch our whiskies till it's at least 9 or 10, 12 years old. This is triple wood. This is what you're tasting first. So let's get that out of the way actually. Leave that alone for a minute. You're tasting 2, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay? So this is triple wood. And the triple wood is a combination from 3 different barrels. Alright? Now the first barrel here, this is American oak. This is American oak. And that American oak had Jim Beam, Buffalo Trace or Heavens Hill bourbon in it. Maybe 3 or 4 years to mature the bourbon. Under US law, when you empty the bourbon from that barrel, you're meant to destroy the barrel or sell it out the country. You're not allowed to keep an empty bourbon barrel in the country. This is to stop people making moonshine and sticking it in a barrel later and claiming it as bourbon later in life. Now American oak is different from European oak. And there's only 2 types we can use. So the American oak is very, very dense. I mean solid. So whatever you put inside the barrel, you're not soak into the wood very deeply because the wood's too hot. But it gives you light golden colours, it gives you honey flavours, and it gives you sweetness. So that's what I'm getting from this. Now this American oak, that was never had bourbon in it. It was made in a barrel, then broken down again, then sent to Spain, reassembled, then they put Spanish Oloroso sherry in it and sat it on a shelf for about 2 years. This is to mature the barrel in sherry, so it's going to change the flavour and the colours. Now when it's been working in there for 2 years, I'm going to still get the same hardness, so I'm not going to get a big colour change. I'm going to get the honey and the sweetness, but the sherry is going to add vanilla, toffee, caramel, ginger, fruits. This is European oak. And European oak is completely different from American oak because European oak is porous. So whatever you put inside of it just sucks into the wood. And I've got all the darker flavours and dark tannins coming out of the wood. It gives you more enhanced flavours. You're going to get vanilla, toffee, chocolate, ginger, cinnamon, spices come out of the wood. You get all flavours coming out. It's gorgeous. A lot of fruits come out. And that's the difference. Now at auction, that first American one's going to cost me best part of about £800 for a new barrel, empty, after the bourbon's been removed. This one, because it travelled across the world, is going to be closer to about £900 to £1,000. And that one, being European sherry barrel, that's going to be something lower than that, about £700. So we buy these at auction, empty.
So your old barrels sitting out there that you see when you're walking up are worth that sort of money?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And that's before we put whiskey in them.
So you haven't seen the ones that sit there, you haven't even put whiskey in these ones?
Yes, they'll have whiskey in them, but they've had whiskey before.
Right, okay.
Or they've had sherry, or they've had bourbon,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
white wine, or red wine, or port.
Yeah.
Because in here, we've been allowed to experiment.
Can we use the barrels out there
We
again?
use them about 3, sometimes twice, sometimes 3 times,
Right.
depending how long it's in. If the whiskey's in the barrel for about 9 years, we can use it possibly 3, possibly 4 times. If it's a 25-year-old whiskey, you only get 2 uses of it. But that's 50 years of use. This is how you work in whiskies. Remember, all these costs are building up all the time and everything they're doing.
I hope you guys enjoyed this video here in Glenturret. If you did, please give me a like. Don't forget to subscribe, share the video, and I'll see you next time in a different adventure in David and Scotland. Till next